But it's not just him. There's a lot of houses that are huge in the area.
Yeah, there is some serious investment being made into this area at this point in time. There's a small group of individuals who are affiliated with Facebook, or what is now Meta, who are also establishing a presence in this area. Some really spectacular homes going in.
Welcome to the Nick Fong Podcast. As the broker and owner of Ronival Real Estate, Nick has spent nearly 20 years in Baja, California, sir. And in this podcast, he'll be talking everything Baja, from food and culture to real estate and property management. And now, here's your host, Nick Fong.
All right, welcome back to the podcast. We're on location in Pescadero, located in the Pacific side of the Baja Peninsula. And today's guest is Mark Sherman. Mark, welcome back.
Yeah, thank you. It's good to be back.
We were on a podcast months ago in Cerritos, and I got a little short lesson surfing.
You did great. You got waves.
How's the surf season this time of the year?
Well, that's one of the best things about Cerritos is it's a very consistent beach year round.
Yeah.
So we're blessed. We've got surf all year as opposed to the East Cape and Cabo, which are limited to summertime.
I'm going to go all over the place in this podcast. I want to talk about the location. I want to talk about the property we're in. But let's go back a few weeks ago, because you made the news a few weeks ago, and it was in our team chat. What happened a few weeks ago?
Oh, man. I was involved in a rescue of a powered paraglider who had an accident and wound up in the ocean.
And it was during sunsetting.
Correct.
And what section of the beach were you at when you saw this happen?
I was near the middle of the Cerritos Bay, which is where I frequently walk my dogs in the evening.
And so I didn't know this, but you actually are a lifeguard.
Yeah, I am. And I was part of the initial lifeguard program at Cerritos back in around 2008 or so, which was a combined effort with the lifeguards from Imperial Beach, California, who really donated a lot of time and materials to jumpstart the program here.
So you were already trained to save people, and so you were walking your dog on the beach and you see this glider hit the water?
Yeah, it was about 7:30 and I turned my head to look out towards the ocean and witnessed the last 5 seconds of his descent into the water. And I was kind of in disbelief at first, like, what? All right.
Had you ever saved someone that crashed in a glider before?
Actually, yes. I was involved in another rescue in 2008, 9, something like that, when the ultralight at Cerritos wound up in the ocean offshore with a passenger who in that case was injured, and it was it was a fairly serious rescue.
Right.
Yeah.
But you were on guard, you were on duty when that rescue happened. You're just walking your dog and you see this thing hit the water. How far out into the ocean was the gentleman?
By my estimate, approximately half a mile. He was far out. I mean, not close.
And so I'm guessing you don't have the equipment to rescue someone.
No, actually, I had on a sweatshirt and, work clothes, basically.
Yeah.
So, well, when I witnessed it, obviously I didn't know who the pilot was, but I know that I myself would have been capable of getting out of my clothing and swimming back to the shore, but without knowing who the individual was, I felt like somebody needed to make an effort to make sure this individual was going to be all right, because the sun was, there was about an hour of daylight left when this accident happened.
And the water this time of the year is not warm.
You're correct. The water was in the low 60s at this point. The water here is the coldest in May, June, which is just due to the ocean currents that contribute to pushing the water into this part of the peninsula. So yeah, the water had not changed yet. We were still in the coldest time of the year.
Accident, cold water, half a mile out, sun going down, less than an hour of sunlight. You don't have any equipment. How do you rescue this guy out in the ocean?
Well, that was, the question that came to my mind as well. How can I help this person without having the proper equipment? There's no way that I would be able to offer any assistance without having either a rescue board or a very long board or stand-up paddle board. Right. So, my first thought was I started calling people at Cerritos who may be able to grab the proper equipment and bring it to where I am.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, nobody that I reached out to was actually at the beach. Everybody was, in town or something like that. So one friend actually went to the firefighters because, he didn't really know what else to do. And I happened to remember that I know somebody in the neighborhood who owns a 9-foot foam board, which is a very large foam board.
Yeah.
And how that individual even owns the board is another story in and of itself. But I was able to get a hold of that individual's girlfriend who was just leaving. And I said, hey, just please stay at the house for a few minutes. I need that longboard. And if there's a wetsuit in the house, please, I need a wetsuit too.
Sure.
So I was able to get the 9-foot surfboard, and I was able to get a brand new wetsuit that fit. It was perfect size. But the craziest part of the story is that the parachute had been floating on the surface of the water. Right. And so I was concerned that when I got back, the parachute would have sunk and it would be kind of a needle in a haystack.
Yeah.
But when I got back with the equipment, I was amazed I could still see the canopy out there. So I got the wetsuit on and got the surfboard, and by that point I was feeling a lot better because I had the proper equipment.
Sure.
And I could see a target in the ocean to paddle for. So I started paddling towards the canopy, hoping to find the pilot swimming. That was my thought. He's probably going to be trying to swim to shore. Hopefully I can grab the guy and give him a lift in.
Yeah.
But the closer that I got to his canopy and I hadn't seen him yet, I'm thinking like, this isn't good. But as I approached his canopy, I heard him. And I'm like, well, it turns out he was on his phone. He had a flotation device, which he had inflated with compressed air prior to
impact,
to landing in the water. And he was floating. He had managed to make some phone calls. He was talking to his ex-wife apparently when I got out there. And I was very relieved. The guy was by himself. He wasn't injured. I wasn't quite sure if he had a passenger on board when I had witnessed this, but it all worked out perfectly. The surfboard was just sufficient to float 2 people.
Yeah.
And the guy did an amazing job of assisting me to paddle because, I told him, you're going to have to help me, man. There's a lot of weight on this board. And he did excellent. Yeah. And anyways, I would say all things considered, it went as good as it could have gone.
Well, it sounded like a lot of things lined up for you. The fact that you were, just for 5 seconds, you happened to see him go down.
Right.
I mean, that's just a matter of seconds. That you're a trained lifeguard.
Right.
That you know someone nearby that has a board that's big enough, a wetsuit, and that this gentleman had a flotation device that he was able to, because he was, I'm imagining, not out there.
He was fully clothed. I mean, he had gotten his shoes off, but jeans, long sleeves.
So he's heavy. He's probably tired.
Yeah.
And it's extremely cold.
It was very cold. Like I said, when I got the wetsuit, I was feeling much better because the water was in the low 60s at that point.
So you guys can imagine this. I don't know anything about anything until I see these pictures that were posted on Facebook with you and the gentleman and the bomberos, the fire department. And that story is just absolutely incredible. It's not the only one, though. Being a lifeguard, you've saved plenty of people.
Well, this one, it was, like I said, the second time that I've responded to an aircraft in the ocean. So when I was able to locate the equipment, there was definitely a sense of, well, I've done this before.
Yeah. So truth be known, this is the second time I've heard this story, and Mark he's a surfer. He loves the area. You've been here for a number of years, but you were telling me a few weeks ago that you also do something else that's extreme. Can you tell everyone about what that extreme sport that you do? Jumping?
Well, I was a very avid skydiver at one point in time, yes. And I also was involved in base jumping as well. Mm-hmm. I've been taking a little bit of a hiatus. I would say surfing almost replaced parachute sports, although there's definitely a part of me that's always considering getting back in the air. You know, I mean, I was very active for a while.
Have you kiteboarded?
No, I have not, and I'm sure that I would love it. It looks like a blast. There's probably some aspects of canopy control that would transfer. Always wanted to give it a try. I'm sure it's an absolute blast.
Hey, thanks for being a part of the Nick Fong Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast to get the latest updates. And if you're watching this on our social channels, please like and share. And if you want to be featured, or you want me to talk on a certain topic, food, activities, culture, real estate in the Baja, drop a comment. Well, that's a great story, and nothing related to real estate. That's great. I'd like to bring it back to real estate and tell everyone where we're located. Where are we on the map? We did our first podcast in Cerritos. Right. But the neighboring community next to Cerritos is what?
We are in El Gavilan, and we are about 3/4 of a mile north of where we shot the last podcast. And this is actually my favorite area of Pescadero because it is turning into a beautiful high-end residential neighborhood. And one of the attractions is that you're just a stone's throw away from Cerritos. So you can jump in your car and go use the beach, and 5 minutes, you're over there. But when you're done with the beach, you come back to a quiet residential neighborhood that has a totally different vibe than what you find just a stone's throw south.
And you've done a lot of business in this area.
I have.
So much so that you decided to buy your own piece of Gavilan, Pescadero, and we're actually in your casita.
We are, exactly. I was selling lots in this neighborhood before there were really any houses in this neighborhood. The titles only go back to 2005, so really the sales didn't pick up over here until 6 years ago, something like that. And as I was mentioning at that point, there was so much inventory that even when people were feeling an attraction to the area, every lot was for sale on the street. So a lot of people would go home and say, no, I really loved what I saw, but I'm not necessarily feeling a sense of urgency or that I'm going to miss out on this opportunity if I don't make this decision immediately. Well, the situation is now 180 degrees. There's a demand and there is no inventory available.
And so when we were driving up to your house, I was amazed because even though I've been on the beach here, I hadn't paid attention to the houses off the beach. And you're just like a stone throws away from the beach. In fact, we're looking at this huge property in front of us. And you were telling me earlier, that's owned by who?
So that is the Modern Elders Academy, which is owned and operated by Chip Connelly. And I think I had mentioned to you that he began establishing his presence in this neighborhood about 6 years ago, right when the sales were just starting to pick up. And inadvertently, he helped to encourage a lot of these people that I mentioned who had left saying, I really loved what you showed me. Well, when it became known that he was establishing a presence in the area and a business, a lot of these individuals who were on the fence called me and said, hey, I found out who he is. And, he doesn't seem like the type of guy who's made a lot of mistakes with his real estate acquisitions. So let's go ahead and do this. And like I said, now there's no more inventory for lots.
For those that don't know who Chip is, who is he? What's his claim to fame?
Well, Google and Wikipedia will tell you that he is the main player responsible for the success of Airbnb. So he has been in the hospitalities industry, I believe, for the majority of his career. And Airbnb is only one in a long string of accomplishments related to the hospitalities industry that this individual has been involved in. He's a very impressive human being. And it's an honor to have him in the neighborhood.
Literally, I mean, his house is right in front of you.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Modern Elders Academy has received quite a bit of publicity, very positive attention.
What is the academy?
I myself am not overly familiar with the curriculum, but my understanding is that it's life coaching retreats and yoga plays an aspect of it. I know surfing is involved as well. I should familiarize myself.
Well, I'll tell you, because when you just told me earlier today that that's his property, because we noticed it and I was like, what's that huge property? He said, that's Chip's. I was introduced to him for the first time a couple years ago on the Gary V podcast.
Right.
And the academy is for people that are instructors that come and teach people.
Okay.
And then people pay money, also typically business owners, executive level people, managers that are, for whatever reason, they're trying to find their place.
Right.
Because maybe from a professional standpoint, they've achieved a certain level of success, but there's always more to life than the business side. And so it was really impressive. And when I found out that his academy was in the Baja, and then he started talking about Todos Santos, and it was like, what? And I started connecting the dots, and it's interesting that the picture is now completely full in my mind, because that's his property. But it's not just him. There's a lot of houses that are huge in the area.
Yeah, there is some serious investment being made into this area at this point in time. There's a small group of individuals who are affiliated with Facebook, or what is now Meta, who are also establishing a presence in this area. Some really spectacular homes going in.
So you have your own piece of the paradise here.
That's correct.
And so this is the casita that you just finished building. I know there's some details you're still working on, but what's the idea with this property?
Well, I actually have two properties, and the property that we are currently on, I intend to keep for myself. This property will have a main home as well. Where we are sitting is the guest casita, and the adjacent home is a pre-construction sale that's very quickly, nearly coming to market here.
So similar style architecturally of your casita, and you're going to come to market with a pre-construction spec home. And I'm imagining a buyer that would be interested in this area, being your neighbor, could customize even the property.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, a buyer will 100% have the ability to select their own finishes and have total control over everything that goes into it. One of the main advantages to the buyer is, as I mentioned, there's no inventory available over here. And when inventory comes around, it tends to sell about as quickly as it comes up.
Right.
So if somebody were to go down that road, assuming a lot came up, it's quite a process to get through the closing and permitting phase.
Right.
Well, I'm already permitted next door, so we can break ground immediately. Yeah. So a buyer could save approximately a year to a year and a half.
Yep. And time is money, and if you're interested in being Mark Sherman's neighbor, living in this phenomenal area where there's some really good neighbors, and the number one thing in real estate is location. And so this location is undeniable. Mark, the second podcast, thanks. I'd love to come back when you have this completely done and the proper marketing and signs for the spec home next door. As always, I appreciate you being a guest on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
All right, guys, until the next one, bye for now.
Cool.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Nick Fong Podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast and the YouTube channel at youtube.com/Ronival Real Estate and follow Nick on Instagram at NickFong_Ronival. Ready to find your Baja dream home? Check out the latest property listings at Ronival.com or findmexicohouses.com. Hasta luego.